My wife and I had been married 58 years when she placed a blue suitcase by the front door. I thought she was bluffing. Then she handed me a note with one sentence. The sentence was, "I cannot spend the years I have left fighting for the right to be heard." I had won nearly every argument in our marriage. That night, I finally saw what winning had cost us. My name is Walter Brooks. I am 81 years old. Elaine is 79. We met at a church picnic in 1966 and married 2 years later. We raised 2 daughters in a small brick house outside Columbus, Ohio. From the street, our marriage looked steady. We paid the bills. We remembered birthdays. We sat in the same pew every Sunday. But steadiness can hide distance. By the time that suitcase appeared, we shared a home, a calendar, and very little honesty. It was April 17th, just after 7:40 in the evening. Rain tapped the front window. The television was muted. Elaine had made vegetable soup, and I had complained that it needed salt. She said her doctor had asked her to cut back. I told her one bowl would not matter. She said it mattered to her. I quoted something I had read. She put down her spoon and looked at me for a long time. Then she asked, "Walter, do you know what it feels like to be corrected in your own kitchen?" I answered the question as if it were an accusation. I listed the times she had corrected me. I reminded her of a wrong turn she made in 1989. I mentioned a check she forgot to mail 12 years earlier. Within 5 minutes, the soup was cold, and the last 58 years were sitting between us like evidence in a courtroom. Elaine did not shout. That frightened me more. She carried her bowl to the sink, walked upstairs, and returned with the blue suitcase. She placed it by the door. Then she gave me the note. I read it twice. My first thought was still a defense. I wanted to say she was being dramatic. I wanted to explain that I only argued because details mattered. Instead, she said, "I am not leaving because you disagree with me. I am leaving because there is no room for me inside your certainty." That sentence opened a door I had kept locked for years. I used to think our arguments began with important things: money, parenting, retirement. But most began with something small: a thermostat, a restaurant, the proper way to load a dishwasher, the name of an actor in an old movie. I treated every disagreement like a test of competence. If I was wrong about one detail, I felt smaller. So I reached for facts, dates, receipts, and old mistakes. I was not trying to solve the moment. I was trying to protect myself from losing. The habit started long before Elaine. My father believed an apology weakened a man. At our dinner table, he corrected everyone. He could turn a harmless story into a trial. As a boy, I promised I would never be as harsh as him. I kept that promise in volume, but not in spirit. I rarely raised my voice. I simply made my case until the other person became too tired to continue. I called that calm. Elaine experienced it as being erased. One memory returned that night. In 1984, our furnace failed during a January cold snap. Elaine wanted to stay with her sister until the repair was finished. I said the roads were too icy. She said the house was too cold for our girls. I spent an hour proving that the temperature was safe. She stopped arguing and carried extra blankets upstairs. For years, I remembered that I had been right about the roads. I never remembered that she had been scared. Another memory came from our daughter Carol's high school graduation in 1992. Elaine told friends that Carol had practiced her speech for 6 weeks. I interrupted and said it was 5. Everyone laughed awkwardly. Elaine smiled, but the light left her face. On the drive home, she asked why the correction mattered. I said accuracy mattered. What I meant was that being the person with the right answer mattered to me more than protecting her dignity. In 2008, we remodeled the kitchen. Elaine wanted warm oak cabinets. I wanted white. I built a spreadsheet comparing cost, resale value, and cleaning time. She finally said, "Fine, choose whatever you want." I mistook surrender for agreement. Years later, she told me she stopped offering ideas because every preference had to survive my cross-examination. I had created a beautiful kitchen where she no longer felt at home. Retirement made the pattern worse. I left my job in 2013 and suddenly had opinions about everything. How she folded towels, when she watered plants, which route she drove to the grocery store. Elaine became quieter. I congratulated myself because we argued less. The truth was more painful. We had fewer arguments because she had stopped bringing her full self into the room. Have you ever mistaken silence for peace? I did for almost 11 years. The morning after the suitcase appeared, Elaine went to stay with her sister. She did not promise to return. The house sounded different without her. The refrigerator hummed. The hallway clock clicked. At 7:40, I sat at the same table with 2 bowls and 1 person. Her note lay beside the salt shaker. For the first time, I read it without preparing a reply. I began writing down the arguments I was proud of winning. The furnace, the graduation speech, the cabinets, the driving routes, the soup. Beside each one, I wrote what Elaine might have needed: safety, respect, choice, trust, to be heard. That page was difficult because it changed the question. I stopped asking, "Was I correct?" and started asking, "What did my correctness cost the person I loved?" 3 days later, I called Elaine. I had rehearsed a speech, but she stopped me. She said, "If this is another explanation, I cannot listen." So I put the pages away. I told her I would not defend myself. I asked one question: what has it been like to be married to me when I need to win? There was silence for several seconds. Then she spoke for almost 20 minutes. She said she felt lonely beside me. She said she edited stories in her head before telling them, searching for details I might challenge. She said she sometimes agreed just to protect the rest of the evening. She said every apology I offered arrived with the word "but." I listened. My chest tightened. More than once, I wanted to correct the timeline. I pressed my palm against the table and let her finish. When she stopped, I repeated what I had heard, not my interpretation, her meaning. "You felt that peace depended on you becoming smaller." Elaine began to cry. Then she said, "That is the first time in years I have felt heard by you." That was not the moment our marriage was fixed. It was the moment repair became possible. We met with a counselor the following week. I expected techniques. Instead, I learned a humbling rule. Understanding comes before response. I had spent decades listening for errors, not meaning. The counselor asked me to summarize Elaine's feelings before giving my view. At first, it felt unnatural. Then I realized why. I had practiced defending myself for 60 years. I had barely practiced receiving another person's pain. Elaine also owned her part. She admitted that silence had become punishment. She had expected me to notice needs she no longer voiced, but she made one boundary clear. She would not return to the same marriage with better promises. She needed different behavior. So we began with 5 small changes. First, we stopped forcing every disagreement to end immediately. Either of us could call a pause, but we had to name a return time. "Let us talk at 7" was allowed. Walking away without returning was not. A pause became protection, not abandonment. Second, Before answering, we repeated the other person's point, not like a courtroom summary, like a person checking whether love had heard correctly. Sometimes Elaine said, "No, that is not what I mean." I learned to ask again instead of arguing with her correction. Third, I removed the word "but" from apologies. I practiced saying, "I interrupted you. It embarrassed you. I am sorry." Then I stopped. No history, no countercharge, no request for quick forgiveness. A clean apology felt short because excuses had made my old apologies long. Fourth, we retired the archive. Past mistakes could be discussed when they truly explained a pattern. They could not be dragged into a new disagreement as ammunition. The missed check from 12 years ago finally lost its job. Fifth, we created 10 quiet minutes after dinner. No television, no fixing, no correcting small details. One person spoke about the day, and the other asked, "Do you want comfort, help, or simply company?" That question saved us from many unnecessary solutions. These steps sound simple. They were not easy. Change is uncomfortable when an old habit once made you feel safe. I slipped. 2 weeks after Elaine returned, she described a conversation with our daughter and named the wrong restaurant. I felt the correction rise into my throat. She saw it on my face. I took a breath and asked what Carol had said next. Elaine smiled. That tiny moment meant more than a grand speech because it proved I could choose connection while the old impulse was still alive. The deepest lesson was not that facts are unimportant. It was that facts and feelings answer different questions. A fact may tell you what happened. A feeling tells you what the moment did to someone. In a loving relationship, you often need both. But when pain is speaking, accuracy should not be used as a door that keeps compassion outside. A marriage can survive disagreement. It cannot survive two people treating understanding like defeat. Maybe your habit is not correcting details. Maybe you withdraw. Maybe you become sarcastic. Maybe you solve problems before your partner feels heard. Maybe you collect old failures and present them whenever you feel cornered. The form changes, but the question remains. Are you trying to understand the person or win the moment? If you recognize yourself in my story, do not promise a complete transformation tonight. Choose one repair you can repeat. Ask one honest question. Listen without preparing a defense. Name the harm without adding, "but." If you need a pause, promise when you will return. Trust is rarely rebuilt by one perfect conversation. It returns through small moments that stop proving the old fear. Elaine did unpack the blue suitcase, but not that first night. It stayed beside her sister's guest room closet for 3 weeks. I used to wish she had brought it home sooner. Now I am grateful she did not. The suitcase reminded us that love without room to speak becomes a place someone may need to leave. Last month, we sat in our warm oak kitchen. Yes, we changed the cabinet doors. Elaine chose them. I made soup and forgot the salt. She tasted it, raised an eyebrow, and asked whether one bowl would matter. We both laughed. Then I reached across the table and said, "Tell me what today felt like for you." At 81, I no longer want the final word. I want the conversation to remain open. If this story brought someone to mind, tell me one sentence you wish you had listened to sooner. Your words may help another person choose understanding before winning costs them something they cannot replace.